welcome back. It's Kat. I'm flying solo today, reporting on southern Colorado. I just got back from a road trip where I followed the Ancestors Trail, although I actually did the reverse trail that they would have taken. So I'm kind of just reporting on what I did and all the activities that I did and what I found out. And then we followed up soon by the Southern Colorado suite of episodes where I had some really great interviews. I have some more interviews lined up from different pieces of that Southern Colorado experience that some of our ancestors had. I know it's actually fairly rare for some of our ancestors to migrate into Southern Colorado because it was some pretty intense frontier. There wasn't a lot out there for a long time. It could be probably pretty dangerous. There weren't that many settlements. But actually 3 out of 4 of my lines ended up in Southern Colorado. I have my Sanchez and Gonzalez line that ended up, I think probably went through like Trinchera Pass or Tollgate Canyon into Trinchera, the easternmost Trinchera, the one that's just over the Colorado border. If you're coming up like from Folsom, going up into Branson, and then heading over on kind of parallel to 160, like you're headed back to Trinidad, that Trinchera. If you want to hear more about that, we took a road trip out there and found the old original Trinchera settlement along the river, Purgatory River. That was in the road trip episode on Folsom. So that's one. Those are my Gonzalez and Sanchez line ended up over there in Las Animas County. And then my Romero line, my Liras, came up through the San Luis Valley. We're at Costilla, and then I lose them for a little bit, which is, part of what I was trying to piece together during this trip. Some more clues about where they could have been and where to find them. But they did end up in the Walsenburg area and then went up to Pueblo. So I can kind of guess now for my trip that they probably started out in the San Luis Valley and moved over from there. But more to come on that. So like I said, I kind of did the reverse of what my ancestors would have done. So I started out in Pueblo. So that first day in Pueblo, and I was trying to be a little low key on this trip. It was just me. I've had to put it mildly, a lot going on in my actual IRL life. So I just was trying to take it easy a little bit, be gentle with myself, try not to put too much pressure on myself to get too much done. I still kind of got too much done, but it was great. So that first day, I also was sort of working with the schedule that I had, looking at the availability of different historic sites. A lot of things are closed on Sundays. A lot of things are closed on Mondays. Even more things are closed on Tuesdays. So I highly had to cram a lot in that first day on the Saturday. So my first stop was the Steelworks Museum of the West, I believe it's called. I think they've kind of had a rebrand. So that is Colorado Fuel and Iron, CF&I, has an archives and a museum. So my ancestors, this is where my Romero brick wall, which I haven't done an episode on my Romeros yet, so look out for that soon. But the last place that I can place my Romero ancestors is 1894 Salt Creek in Pueblo. And I know that they did work in the mill. I believe I just saw Manuel Romero, who's my great-grandfather, who is a mystery. He was working for the Philadelphia smelter, I believe is the right term. You can make a request to the CF&I archives. You can fill out information requests, specifying which person you're looking for, roughly, what dates did they work there? What did you think they did? Where did they live? That kind of stuff. And I did that on 3 of my guys, 2 great grandfathers and my great great grandfather, or sorry, 1 great grandfather, 2 great great grandfathers. And I just got the email back from the archivist that they were not able to find anything on my folks, which is kind of a bummer, but it was a long shot because they worked there like in the, I guess, maybe 1880s, definitely the 1890s, before they really probably had really substantial records. They said that the records get really solid after World War II, I believe, but before that, they're a little spotty. They did also say that, because obviously they don't have a full-time staff, going through all their records, there could be a box somewhere that just like hasn't been gone through or indexed or filed or whatever. So fingers crossed that at some point they'll turn up some records on those guys, because I'm I obviously at my brick wall. So I know that they lived in Salt Creek neighborhood, which was sort of its own, I don't know what you want to call it. People gave me several names for what it was, but I don't believe it was incorporated until like the 1960s or 70s or something, although I believe they were still paying city taxes but not receiving city services or something. I don't think they got like running water or hooked up to the sewer system or something until like the 70s. So, and from what I understand geographically, it was sort of where no one wanted to live and you couldn't really do anything with the land agriculturally. So it's like right between like the river and the slag piles. I don't honestly, even after touring the Steelworks Museum, don't understand a lot about how they processed all this material. It kind of all goes over my head. I'm there for the history. But basically it was a very inhospitable place where you couldn't farm it. It's like when I was driving around there, it's very, hilly isn't even it's like scraggy. That's where, my family lived. This is the Aliras and the Romeros. They married into the Lopezes and the Cocas. And the guys worked at the mills. I'm presumably, from what they told me at the museum, if they started like in the Walsenburg area and they came up to Pueblo, it was probably because you made more money working in the mills and it was sort of less dangerous than working in the mines, which is maybe what they would have been doing in Walsenburg. There still were a lot of risks, but you weren't like, there wasn't going to be like a cave-in or something like that. And they made a little bit more money. So, but presumably, I mean, from what I can understand, Salt Creek was it was right there next to the mill. So it was extremely polluted. It was very hot. The river's right there, but I think it was pretty polluted. So the interpretive sign that they have when you go to Salt Creek said that there was like a well or a spring that all the people would get their water out of. So I think it was probably a rough life down there for them. Okay, so that was the Steelworks Museum. So I learned a little bit more there. I did learn that in 1900, there were only 515 Hispanics in Pueblo of 30,000 residents. Now, given what I just said, that Salt Creek wasn't really, I don't think, maybe considered part of the city. I don't know. I'm not sure if Salt Creek was counted in that. There was also something called Mexico Town, which seems like it was fairly close to what's now downtown Pueblo. But there were a couple of little like Goat Hill, Mexico Town, Salt Creek, and another area had a lot of Hispanos there. In 1906, 10% of the population in Colorado worked for CF&I. That seems pretty huge. So after that, I went over to the Pueblo Heritage Museum, which was really cool. I didn't know there was so much stuff there. There was a lot to look at, and I was limited on time. So I really stuck to, they kind of had, because Pueblo has such a diverse, like ethnic diversity because of the mills, they had sort of like an exhibit area on each, like the Italians. And so they had a specific section that was for Hispanos, that was really cool, and had some information that I don't think I've really maybe seen or put together before. So I really appreciate, clearly, some people put a lot of time into that area, and it's really, really well done. So I learned a lot there. There's like an interactive touch screen where, they give like a timeline and some information on like some boards. But then you can go a little bit deeper in this touchscreen thing. So you can click on like something like about architecture or whatever, and it would give you just like really in-depth information that I don't feel like I've really seen elsewhere. So that was really cool. There was a map of settlements in southern Colorado that was really, really helpful to kind of understand migration patterns and just sort of where everything was located. And to understand a little bit better, why they were in certain places and then moved along. So that was a cool museum. They also have a pretty good gift shop. So I got a booklet that some people had put together about Salt Creek, and that was really helpful. It did talk about early on, so early days, like when I think it was before 1900 when, my family was there. Probably from the late 1880s or sometime in the 1880s, they moved up there, and they were there in the 1890s before they moved up to, eventually they kind of slowly ended up in Colorado Springs by like 1905. But they would still return to Pueblo even after they were working, I think, in the slaughterhouse in Colorado Springs. They would, like, when you look at the city directories, they're kind of bouncing back and forth. This extended family. So this history said that prior to 1900 or around 1800, they think that there were like 10 families living in Salt Creek. And I know my family was like at least three of those families. So I feel like there's more opportunity there to maybe explore, maybe do like a deep dive on the families, like who were those 10 families or whatever, and I feel like I know them a little bit because of the going through all the Sacramento records, which are not indexed. So you have to go through every single one of them. So I kind of got a feel for some of those names and families, but I feel like I maybe could do a deep dive just in that area since it's such a small little population. And also I think that's a good clue to help me find where they came from, those Romeros, and there's more on that later. So by that point, the museums were closed. So I had a couple hours at the library there in Pueblo. They had a lot that I wanted to look at, but I had limited amount of time. So I focused on the city directories, which they had starting from, I believe, 1887 was the first one. I mean, it's spotty. You really don't get kind of consistent ones until a few years later. But I did find my Manuel Romero in Pueblo, I believe, as early as 1891. So actually, maybe that's my new starting point, is the earliest that I can find him. Is 1891 in Pueblo, and he is working as a laborer in the Philadelphia smelter company or whatever. So that was cool. I wish I'd had more time there. But they didn't open till 1 the next day on Sunday, so I had to jet. So for the rest of that evening, I cruised around Salt Creek just to kind of get a feel for that area. Again, really interesting area, really kind of easy to picture what it might have been like back then. I spent some time by the river, which was really beautiful. And then I stayed at an Airbnb that was real weird. You know, you kind of don't know what you're going to get with an Airbnb. And I had two choices that were like the same price. And I decided to go with the more adventurous one, which was maybe not the greatest choice, but it's going to be a gamble. So I woke up early the next morning because I didn't feel the need to stay in this Airbnb for any longer, and caught the tail end of Mass at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So from what I can tell, looking at the records for my family, the main church, I thought I read that St. Patrick's was the only church in Pueblo for a while. Somebody else said that wasn't true, but I think that St. Patrick's was like their main mother church for a while. So their records are at St. Patrick's for years, and then they suddenly dropped off. And shout out to one of our primos on one of the Facebook groups, because as soon as I asked what happened here, because then there's like a bunch of other churches that open up in Pueblo, and I didn't know if I needed to look, because they're not indexed, you have to look through every single record. And one of our primos pointed me to Our Lady of Mount Carmel, that's where they switched over. So that was a huge lifesaver. Saved me so much time. So what I wanted to do is kind of walk how they would have walked. So to go from Salt Creek to those churches. So to go from Salt Creek to St. Patrick's, and then to go from Salt Creek to Our Lady of Mount Carmel, to see, was this more convenient for them? Because it actually it was to serve the Italian population. The Italians complained that they weren't being served. They were being neglected. And so they did eventually get their own church, which was Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It was like right down the street from, oh gosh, now I can't remember the name of it, the Slovenian one. So like the Slovenian Catholics had their own church, the Italians had their own church. But eventually, I think because it was a convenient location, some families from Salt Creek and other people started coming to that church as well. So thankfully, they were, I guess, whatever the motivation were, they kept separate books. So there's different sacramental books, like for the Italians than for the Hispanos. So I'm sure they didn't have great reasons for doing that, but I'm thankful as a genealogist in this day and age that they did that, because it makes it much easier to find your family. So all of their sacramental records start showing up at that church. So, and I think I had seen St. Patrick's before. I'd been by there before. But I hadn't been to Mount Carmel. I think maybe I just discovered that just in the last couple of years. I didn't realize that they were there. And what a delightful surprise. It's like right on the river, kind of tucked away in the little neighborhood called the Grove. Just as a side note, a few years ago, a beloved aunt passed away in Denver, and we were driving back from her funeral, and my dad struggles with driving because of his Parkinson's. And so I was driving in the cities, and he would drive if we were sort of like out in the middle of nowhere, like a straight road, not a lot of traffic. So I forgot that Pueblo, the interstate through Pueblo, is like like curves, like it's just really intense. There's like no merge areas. It's like a race course. So I forgot that. So he came around one of those curves and was like, his Parkinson's causes him to like go left, basically. So we got into this hellacious car accident, but we were completely protected. Went over onto the median thing. We flew up into the air, came crashing back down, and then sort of wandered back into the left lane of the interstate. And he somehow managed to like sort of get over into the right lane onto the shoulder and then to exit almost immediately. We like pull off of this off ramp and just like cruise into a tire shop that just happened to be right there at the exit. And then these guys pull up next to us, and they were like behind us on the interstate and saw the whole thing. And they were amazed that we were still alive. They said a semi had like just come through, and like if we had just been like a little bit over, the semi would have just like plowed right through us on the left lane of this interstate. But they were mobile mechanics. These guys were so sweet, and the tire shop had the kind of tire that we needed. These guys got us this part that we needed. This was a rental car, by the way. Got us like all fixed up and ready to go. We hit the road and everything worked out great. Anyways, the point of this story is that it turns out that all of this happened. The little tire shop, everything was like a block away from Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And so we said at the time that it was my aunt who had protected us through all of that, how amazing it went. But then I couldn't help thinking that, hey, we probably had some ancestors helping us as well, that we were right there, like in their neighborhood. So I caught the tail end of mass, and the priest was really awesome and like gave me a really great tour. He loves history, so he had a bunch of historical information about the church. The pews that are in there, because St. Patrick's is now closed down, the pews that are at Our Lady of Mount Carmel are from St. Patrick's. So that's really cool. If I can't go into the church where my family went earlier, at least like these are the pews, and then this is the church they went to afterwards. So that was a really, really great experience. I'm a little obsessed with Catholic history in these towns in southern Colorado. Obviously there was such a huge European population of Catholics that fostered these just like really incredible, rich, vibrant Catholic churches, Catholic schools. There were convents. It feels very rich to me. That's also one of my only clues for my Romero family is that they were, so I'm looking, I have my Alira's great grandmother. I know a lot about her and her family. She was a member of this society. I will have to look up the name of it. Okay, I found a post that I asked about this in a Facebook group, and Pat Sanchez, God bless, said it's Sodality of the Blessed Virgin Mary. In this case, they were meeting at the Carmelite monastery, which I believe the priest told me was across the street. Most of the churches had a sodality to the Blessed Mother. We learned church history and would help with cleaning the church. In my case, the nuns taught me how to make some of the altar cloths and fingertip towels used at Mass. Wow. Thank you, Pat. You're the best. One of the only things that sort of links her other than their marriage, obviously, to her husband, Manuel Romero, is that he was also a member of this society, which is really cute, and probably how they met. Or they met in Salt Creek and she talked him into joining this. I don't know. I'm trying to find out more about this society. As far as I can tell, it was maybe sort of like an altar society. I'm not sure what all that they did, but if anyone has any more information, please let me know. You can reach me at luminariapod@gmail.com. I don't think I probably ever say that. So it was just really lovely to be in that space where my family worshiped, where they had their sacraments, where they prayed. It was just a really cool experience that I really appreciate. From Pueblo, on Sunday I wanted to go to the El Pueblo History Museum. I wanted to go to that for years. For some reason, they were not opening until late that day. For whatever reason, so I was bummed about that. I went to a cute coffee shop instead. Headed south to the Walsenburg area. Now, the records, I did double check the sacramental records for my family out of St. Mary's Church in Walsenburg list them as being in Huérfano, as opposed to like other people are listed at being from Cucharas. So I still have not identified where that would have actually have been, but I have a couple of interviews lined up in the next few weeks where I think I'm going to get that answer, because I really still don't know where that would be. So it was still, I didn't mean to end up in Walsenburg for the night. I was supposed to camp at, what's the name of that park? Lathrop State Park. And a storm came in, and it was a little intense, and there was a rainbow over the Anchor Motel. So I took that as a sign and stayed there for the night, which was lovely. Very affordable, clean, highly recommend it. So it was cool. So the next morning when I got up and went to get some coffee, or tea in my case, I was able to walk over to St. Mary's Church, which I don't think I had actually ever done before, and discovered the school there as well, which of course is shut down. But again, I'm just sort of obsessed with this like vibrant Catholic community, and they had this like gorgeous school that was named after Gabriel Ussel, who I have an interest in because he, obviously was the officiant and he was the priest for so many of my family and their sacraments. So I have an interest there. I don't know. You just get a sense of real life and community that you had a convent, you had a school, you had it just seemed like, I think maybe I'm a little envious of that kind of vibrant community that maybe we don't have so much of anymore. And I can see it a lot in these churches and the school. I can imagine that was just a big source of support and community for some of our families. So that was kind of a cool little detour, because I don't think I had actually, as much as I've looked at those, and my family was there before that church building would have been built. So it wasn't the same church that they went to. I'm sure that school was built after my family was there. I think my family left Walsenburg like in the mid 1880s. So, but it felt cool to me. After I spent time in that morning in Walsenburg, I headed towards the San Luis Valley. Again, I was reversing the trek of my ancestors. So I first stop was Fort Garland. So I, of course, went to the Fort Garland historic site, which is amazing. I'd been there before, but I have more information now. So it was just a cool experience. It's a really great resource, really excellent bookshop. I got Virginia Sanchez's Forgotten Cuchareños of the Lower Valley, finally, so I can read that before our next interview, and to get a little bit more information about, sort of the paths that my Romeros might have taken from the San Luis Valley over towards Cucharas and Huérfano. So, and there were a lot of other books I was tempted to get too, but I already have way too many books that I still haven't read. So I'm trying to restrict myself a little bit. Chatted with the staff there a little bit about some questions that I have. I think that'll be a later episode about possible migration through there, and then possibly my wild speculation about how my great great grandparents met, because my great great grandmother I know she was in Costilla, and then my great great grandfather was a New Mexico volunteer, and then came up and became joined with the Colorado volunteers after the fact. I know that he was there, so I need to get some concrete information about what companies he was and stuff like that. And if maybe they had crossed paths there, like if she was a maid there or whatever. While I was in the bathroom at Fort Garland, they had, a fun fact up on the stall. And it said that there were, they hired brought in local girls to be washerwomen or servants or whatever at the fort, but it was really hard to keep them because then the soldiers would marry them. So I wondered, hey, could that be my great grandmother? And that's how they met. So hopefully that'll be a future episode specifically on Fort Garland and what was going on in that area, because there was so much that I couldn't even begin to touch on now. They have that really cool art installation on enslavement. We'll talk more with Virginia about that in a little bit. But really powerful, cool exhibit. All the Buffalo Soldier stuff was really interesting. So I really love that inclusion, those different perspectives. And then I just just being in that area just felt really right. I don't know if it's ancestor stuff or whatever, but I just decided to stay there. I was supposed to go camp in the mountains for a couple of nights, but the weather was kind of gnarly. I was needing a little bit of comfort. I decided to stay at the Lodge Motel in Fort Garland for a couple of nights and loved it. It was really great. Great family who owns it. Highly recommend it. Very affordable, very clean, a really beautiful setting. So I ended up staying there for a couple of days. I went down to San Luis. They have a really great little coffee shop. I got a gluten-free scone, which, I mean, where can you get a gluten-free scone? I bought way too much at the Welcome Center. I went to Rio Seco Park, which in Oklahoma, a park means something really different than in Colorado. This was like a gorgeous stream with forest. We don't call that a park here in Oklahoma. Our parks are like, there's like some Bermuda grass and maybe like a swing set or something, or a bench. And then I ate at I think it's called Miss Rio's or Mrs. Rio's or something, and had a very inventive chili rano that was delicious nonetheless. So I was just really enjoying those San Luis vibes. I went down to the reservoir. I went to the Mother Mary of God meditation garden that's just started there, and it was really stunning and a really great place, and I love what they're trying to do there. I do recommend that. I went to the other reservoir too that's more by like Fort Garland. That was also beautiful. So I really found some peace there in the San Luis Valley. I really hope to have an episode specifically about the genealogy of that area, and maybe get some clues about my Romero family. So the next day I started back heading east. I went through La Veta, which was very cute. I toured Fort Francisco. After all worrying about, things being closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, I actually ended up there at a time when they were open, like right when they had opened for the week. So that was great. They had some interesting things, a really interesting piece. They had a shawl that Charles Bent had bought for his wife. So it was kind of cool and traced like he bought it in Taos at a market or from a trader or something like that. And then gave it to his wife, and then sort of like how it passed down to be in this museum. And I kind of thought that was a really cool piece. I also was able to purchase a historical map of settlements in the Huerfano Valley in the Huerfano County, which was a really, really fantastic find. So from there, I took Highway 12, which is gorgeous. Lots of history in there, down to Trinidad. Trinidad has really dressed themselves up since the last time I was there. I've always loved Trinidad. I had a connection there and spent some time there way before I ever knew I had any familial connections to Southern Colorado whatsoever. And it's such a cool place. And they have really put a bunch of money into development. So they just have a ton going on there. Lots of like fun, like good restaurants, coffee shops, this really great bakery where I got a gluten-free apple pie that was to die for. And I literally went back the next day and got another one because it was incredible. So I feel like I really did up Trinidad. I ended up staying there for longer than I had intended. But there were just like a lot going on. So I'm happy they have like a river walk. They're taking advantage of what's there, which is great because there's so much there. And like over the years, if you've gone through Trinidad, it's just really sad to see it not be the potential there and all the history and incredible architecture and these beautiful buildings, not being used, not being taken advantage of. And then, you have a lot of these, people from Oklahoma, people from Texas going through there all the time on their way to other places in Colorado. Well, the Spanish Peaks area is also stunning, but everybody's bypassing that to go to the Front Range or whatever. You want to like support those communities and bring something to those economies so that they can continue to thrive and people can learn about our history, etc. But then of course it does change the tenor of your community. It brings money in. It brings a lot of people in who maybe don't have communal ties there. So I get it's not, as is everything with everything in life, there's good and there's bad to it. But I think it's cool that Trinidad is really trying. I think, I'm sure that locals maybe resent some of this and some of the tourist stuff that's coming in, but I was happy to see it. They have a Friends of the Library bookstore, which of course I'm going to go to. However, just a little warning that apparently they have locals who get a phone call anytime any kind of local history comes in about Southern Colorado, etc. And those books go straight to them. So that's kind of what I was looking for, but no luck there. Again, I was doing my tour of Catholic Southern Colorado, so I actually wasn't able to go into Holy Trinity. Wait, it's Holy Trinity, right? Yeah. I still have never been inside that church. I have a family connection to the Barellas. Casimira Barella, it was the state senator for like 42 years from Southern Colorado. Incredible man. Did absolutely amazing things for the culture. He had the state constitution of Colorado translated into Spanish so that our people could actually read it. And my relative, his son-in-law, is the one who actually did the translation with his wife. So I know that they really helped build that church, and that the stained glass windows, I believe that he bought and had them put in honor of his first wife who had passed away. But I still was not able to go into the church. However, so you do have to make an appointment they have a genealogy library at the public library there. There's a Carnegie Library. That's, of course, gorgeous. But you do have to make an appointment ahead of time so that the librarian can be with you in the genealogy room while they're not on the desk. So you kind of have to time that out right. It took me a bit to time it right. And that's why I had to stay a little bit of extra time in Trinidad to accommodate that. So I had 2 hours in the genealogy library, which wasn't that much. But they do have some interesting stuff there. That actually was probably the best find that I had. I wasn't really focused on this trip on finding records. I was more just looking for context. But I actually did get some information. So the librarian found, like I said, my Sanchez and Gonzalez's were in Trinchera. Not a lot has been written about Trinchera. It's very obscure. There's really, like, the Folsom Museum had a little write-up on it. But it's very hard to find information about that Trinchera. Well, the librarian had a brilliant idea and remembered that the library has folders on all different little towns in that area. And they had a folder on Trinchera. And it had like newspaper clippings that were like retrospective pieces or historical pieces that had been written. And they had a couple of those, which were cool and gave some information, including one where they listed the founding families of Old Trinchera Plaza, and all of my people were listed there, which was amazing. I don't know if other people have this experience, but I know that my ancestors were in some of these places, like Salt Creek, for example. Okay, well, apparently my family was like 3 out of 10 families in this historic neighborhood that has its own rich history. But no one's like, there's no name. I did wonder, like, how do you determine who are the founding families of a place? I mean, sometimes it's associated with who's on the land grant, or, that's easy. But what about, when there's either not a land grant or some people came a little bit after the land grant was like established. They're not on the paperwork or whatever. So I know my ancestors were there, but just like there's nothing written about it. It's not documented. They're clearly not prominent enough to like be listed anywhere. But this was it. They were there listed as like a founding family of this Trinchera Plaza. So big thanks to the Trinidad Library. That was a really cool find. And thank you, Librarian Tom, for remembering that folder. The other cool thing that Tom found for me, because I was asking about the actual location of, so Holy Trinity Church is there, and that was built in like 1882. So I do know that when my ancestors went to do church there and stuff, sacraments, that was the actual church they would have gone to. Although in Trinchera they had the San Jose Church, so I don't actually know if they ever went into Trinidad for church. But I know that Casimira Barella's daughters, one of which married into my family. They, in the 1885 Colorado Territorial Census, they are listed as living at the convent school in Trinidad. And so when I went there, I did ring the doorbell on the the parish offices, and they said, well, the school's right there. So but if you look at the stone for the school, it says 1887. So I was asking at the library, well, where was the school before 1887? Because I know my people were there at least in 1885. And I know from reading the stuff about Sister Blandina that, she started the school, I believe, in the 1870s. So where was that? And where was the original church? So he got the Sanborn maps and printed them off for me from like 1883, and then in 1887, I think maybe, and printed out so that I took those maps with me and walked it, because actually the original school was behind the library where the library is now, and actually walked it and like could tell like where the actual convent had been, where the school had been. And then he found this photo of the Holy Trinity Church with the school in the background. And he found it for me because it was a historical photo of the old school. But the reason they took this photograph was because it was the funeral procession for the victims of the Ludlow massacre. And so the streets are just filled with people, and it's the funeral procession with all these little coffins. And it's just a really powerful photo. So my trip to the Trinidad Library was a success. I was really pleased. I also went to the courthouse because my great-grandfather Sanchez, he and his wife got divorced in 1901, which is kind of wild. I don't think very many people got divorces in 1901. This is the Sanchez ancestor who married. I discussed her in my episode with Virginia, my first interview with Virginia Sanchez, about enslavement in Mora County, because she was Navajo. She was captured when she was 3, baptized when she was 3 into the Tafoya family, and then followed them to that Trinchera Plaza area and married my great-great-grandfather. Well, they got divorced in 1901. And so I actually can't remember how I think I found that there's a divorce index online in Colorado. And then I can't remember how I found the actual records. They were telling me at the Las Animas County Courthouse that I needed to look into the state archives. And I kind of have a vague recollection that I actually went to the state archives and put in a request there, and then they emailed me the records. So the records that I have are it's like the court case, a little bit of the verdict. So that's cool information. Like, it does give a little bit of information about like when they got married, what were the grounds for their divorce, etc. But they refer to court transcripts and testimonies. And so that's been on my list for years, is to try to track down that actual, like, the testimonies of witnesses. Like, how cool would that be? So I went to the Las Animas County Courthouse and they found nothing. So I'm trying to remember it. So they said try the state archives, but I'm vaguely remembering that the state archives told me that if I wanted detailed information like that, like the transcripts, that would be at the county courthouse. But this is 1901, so that's a real long shot. But so I wasn't too bummed. Also the courthouse is just really cool, so it was fun to just be in that building and spend a little time there. But I didn't find any information. So the other thing going on in Trinidad is, if you're familiar with Sister Blandina, I want to do a whole episode on her because I think she's really cool. So that'll be a future episode just on her. She was a nun that came from Ohio in like the 1870s, 80s, first to Trinidad. Then she went, I believe, to Santa Fe and Albuquerque, then back to Trinidad. She has a book or memoirs or whatever. I think they were just letters that she wrote, or journals maybe. And she's really hilarious. And it's one of the few accounts of Hispano settlements that's not just like really racist and derogatory. So I think she's really great. I'd like to do a whole episode on her, but they are in the process of trying to get her canonized. So there's slowly becoming Sister Blandina industry. The Sister Blandina industrial complex is starting to rev up in Trinidad. So they have like wellness gardens. They had a little gift shop. I feel like there wasn't actually a whole lot of actual information about her and what she did. So I wish they had a little bit more about that, but or like a plaque where, because like I had to track down where the original school location was from the librarian, but it would be cool if they had like a monument or something like that that explained what she did and how she was important to the community. So I camped that night at Trinidad Lake State Park, which was beautiful. And then the next morning, I got up and went to the Trinidad History Museum, which I had never been to before. This trip was kind of like wanting to do the stuff I feel like I never had time for previous genealogy trips because I was always hunting down records. And this time I just wanted to chill out a little bit and just like actually just go to the historic sites and stuff like that. So I'd actually never been there before. So this kind of divided up into different sections. Apparently you have to make, or I don't know if you have to make an appointment, but they have specialized tours of the Baca House, the Felipe Baca House, who is the kind of the founding father of Trinidad, who I am sort of interested in because I had that interesting trajectory where he came up into that area, like freighting and trading and stuff like that. And I do wonder, because 3 out of 4 of my lines ended up in southern Colorado, if they had a similar story where, you know, someone in the family was doing trading or freighting or something like that, went through these areas and came back home and was like, hey, we should move up here. So I am sort of interested in that, but I decided to eat my lunch. They have really nice gardens. And so I was eating my lunch and had just finished up and saw like a couple go by with a staff person. And evidently that was the 1:00 tour of the Baca House, and I missed it. I'm kind of bummed that I missed that. So I went and toured the Santa Fe Trail, sort of more local history part of it, which was pretty cool. I did learn a lot there, and I liked their exhibits. They had a little thing on Rumalda Boggs, which is of interest to me because she's connected to my family as well. I thought that was really cool, and I like that inclusion. They had some stuff on like women in history in this area. And then I headed down to Clayton and camped at Clayton Lake State Park, which is my favorite place to camp. I love it down there. Now, part of this trip was also wanting to explore the original Raton Pass, and to like go over the original pass and try to see if is there anything left of the Dick Wooten trading post, toll gate, stopover area. And I can't find anything online about it other than the original Raton Pass is closed now. You can't get through there because private landowners have shut off access, which apparently is controversial. So you can't actually explore that area. Apparently, that church that you see up there, the Morley, that was from the Morley community. I think, from what I can tell, it is on private land, and you have to ask permission, or you can't go up there. So that was on my agenda for this trip that just wasn't possible to accomplish, but it was a really great trip. I really, really pleased with how much I was able to do. I met a lot of really great people who gave me a lot of more context for these migration patterns, where people were coming from, why. I think I'm going to learn more about that with some future interviews and hopefully figure out if I do think I really have a better idea. It seems that if the Romeros were in Pueblo in the 1890s, that they very likely would have come up from like the Huerfano area, and before that from the San Luis Valley, probably Castilla or Arroyo Hondo, possibly Taos. So I just have some ideas about where to look for those mystery Romeros and try to track them down finally. I still have hope that one day I can find them. So we'll see in the next couple of weeks as I do a couple more interviews. We'll have many more episodes from along my journey. But this was such a great experience. I loved soaking up just all the energy of just being with our ancestors. I think that the highlight of my trip really was I spent a lot of time sitting by the rivers where I know that my ancestors lived on. And maybe they sat and did some contemplation if they had any time, which they probably didn't. Maybe they washed in those waters. Maybe they did some laundry there. Maybe they lost some of their children in that area. It just felt like I really got a little hang time with the ancestors, and that was really, I think, made the trip really, really worth the time and effort. I was really tired from everything that's going on and trying to squeeze that trip in, but thanks for hanging in with me, and hopefully we'll have some really informative interviews coming up in the next couple of weeks. If any of your ancestors were also migrated into this area, they had this is why my parents moved like 40 something times in their lifetime since they were married. And my mom has always begrudgingly had to go along with this because, of course, she was the one, as she always points out, is the one who had to pack up the house and sell the house and get it ready and get all the kids ready and like acclimate them to a new place over all of these different moves. And so when I learned that 3 out of 4 of my dad's lines had made this sort of adventurous move into southern Colorado, that all sort of made sense. Like, so I was able to tell my mom, this is in his blood. He has this sort of, I don't know if it's wanderlust or if it's courage or if it's curiosity or restlessness or something to seek a new place, to move to a new location, to chart uncharted waters, however you want to phrase it. But it is another case where like learning more about your ancestors informs your own family or your own journey. So hopefully you all will enjoy this trip to southern Colorado. Maybe it's actually making me think that I need to change the description of this podcast to include southern Colorado, since it's not just New Mexico. But I think many of you have similar lines in your family as well, of people who settled in those areas, and their stories really need to be told. So I'm really excited to share this journey. Thanks for listening to Luminaria. You can reach me at luminariapod@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is of Varsoviana, performed by Nieves Anaya and his daughter Ernestina Anaya at Arroyo Hondo, New Mexico in 1940. It's part of the Juan Bautista Rael collection at the Library of Congress.